Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll give people a minute or two to join.
Hello.
Hi,
Your
Michael.
mic works.
Hello.
Ari's microphone works. Bart's microphone works.
Yeah. Mine didn't work, or?
Yes,
Yeah.
yours worked.
Yeah, good.
I just didn't say your name.
Yeah, no problem. I just realized that with all these things to push, you never know if you push the right button. So, right. Let's see if I. Okay. Share slides. Okay. It's 2 minutes past. Should we get going? I see you nodding. Good. Okay. We welcome to the. This should probably interim 3, the third interim of this year for the ASDF working group. Note well, you will be recorded. Follow the traditional area IETF code of conduct. Be nice, be professional, and the usual IPR guidelines apply for us for all IETF meetings. You have the repo for the working group notes there, and you also have the link to the meeting notes. So if you go there, you'll find the meeting notes. Yeah, this is the normal note. Well, we flash it every meeting. Well, we did the short form in the previous slide. So, but please check here if you have any questions. And here's the code of conduct that we need to follow. Treat colleagues with respect. Speak slowly and limit use of slang. I should speak slowly. Dispute ideas by using reasoned argument. Use best engineering judgment to find the best solution for the whole internet and contribute to the ongoing work of the group and the IETF. Yes, and now we get to the agenda. And we already covered now note well, point 1. And since you're here, we know that you have managed to join up on Meeteco. And there is the link again onto the notes. We will briefly, we will briefly do a working group status update, very brief one. Also, as well, a really brief status update on SDF, and then we will look at the digital twin draft and the NIPSI draft. And then at the end, any other business. Any sort of agenda bashing things to add? I hear none. Okay, let's move on. Yes, let's move on. Sorry, I was distracted. So we were chartered in 2020. Same chairs as always. Progress that we submitted the SDF specification to ISG for publication. I will get back to that in a moment. We had a new charter since June this year, and we've had another draft adopted, which is NIPSI draft. We have meeting plan-wise, we have an upcoming interim in a month's time, in early October. And then, of course, the question is if we should try to meet in person in Dublin at IETF 121. So we haven't discussed this, Michael, but are you? Yes, I think I'm also going. So I've said that many times, but I hope to travel this time.
Okay.
Yeah. Bart? You are muted.
I would say the answer to the question is whether or not we have sufficient quorum of core people. That if we don't, then there's no point meeting. The other consideration, assuming that's true, the other consideration is there are we making progress, and are there people that would participate because they're there, but we don't see them otherwise, that we would get review from. And well, we had our last physical meeting last year in Prague, so probably this is a good idea.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of interest in IPSI there, right? So I think it would be a good idea to actually try to meet in person here again. You seem... Bart, are you trying to talk, or?
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. Sorry, yeah, and we are also thinking about the NIPSI SDF integration, right? And since, if we can get folks there that have done a lot of work on SDF, plus the folks that have worked on NIPSI, I think we can make potentially some good face-to-face progress, maybe even in a side meeting or something. So I'd love to do that.
Yeah, maybe that would be a topic for like a hackathon thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. We haven't discussed it. Ari and Carson is not here because he's on vacation, but yeah, okay, but good. Anyone else want to speak out on meeting in Dublin?
Yeah, I was about to say exactly the same as Bart. So yeah, let's do it.
Good. Now you're muted, Michael.
1 hour, 1.5 hour.
Yeah.
What? How much time do we need?
I think for the full working group, probably like an hour is enough. But like, yeah, definitely a side meeting, design team meeting, and
Yeah.
such. We don't need some whiteboarding.
Okay. Well, that's a separate scheduling problem, and it doesn't sound like you're trying to have a global side meeting, but a design team side meeting. So, almost sounds like yeah.
Yeah, and so then maybe kind of if we can have towards the middle or end of the week the ASDF face-to-face, then we would have time to actually have the discussions during the week. That might make sense.
Yeah. Are you taking notes, Michael, by the way?
I'm not exactly taking notes. I have the web form up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I realized that I was not. We haven't asked anybody to take notes either.
Yeah.
So.
Good point.
Yeah. Let's. I'll take notes on this. Well, what I pick up on the side here, and then we can merge them together. Good. Okay. So we decide then to request a meeting in Dublin.
Okay.
An hour slot, or what was the an hour slot?
Hour slot.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Good.
I think Ari also said 1 hour. So.
Yeah. Good. With that, then we move on, and this is the end of this presentation. Then the next topic was update on SDF, and there Carson has been working on it, but he didn't have time to really wrap it up. So there is still a little bit of things to fix, but we are close to having the final document done. I think that is my reading of what I got from Carsten. Right. And with that, we thought we'd move over to the presentation on digital twins and location. Let me close this deck and see if I can pick up the other one. You see my slide? Yes. So, Yunyo, please go ahead and present your slides.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. I have a short talk for the document titled ASDF for Digital Twin. In this version 3, we describe the requirements for digital twin with reference to ISO 23247 Part 1. Next slide, please. The two slides are the remind from the version 2. The ASDF location is described using conventional GPS coordinates or postal addresses for physical locations. Next slide, please. There are two examples, boat and the heaters in the boat, for location description. The thing boat can have the two types of location, such as geolocation or postal address if it exists. And the heaters in the boat have the location of the boat and the relative address for the indoor location of the boat. And next slide, please. In this version, we adjust the table of contents and added the requirements in clause 5 and security considerations in clause 6 with reference to ISO 23247 Part 1, clause 5.3. Next, please. The left side is the requirements of ISO 23247 Part 1, and the right side is the requirements of this version of ASDF for digital twin. We define 5 requirements and security considerations with reference to ISO standard. I think these definitions are the starting point for what to do in the future to consider digital twin in ASDF. Next slide, please. As shown in the previous slide, the left side is the requirements of ISO 23247 Part 1, and the right side is the requirements of this version. And next slide, please. Okay, this is the conclusion and future plans. We have already defined the requirements in the second bullet, and we are planning to add some contents, including the figure 1, the detailed figure 1, protocol, and the data format, and so on. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Any comments, questions? Ari, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks. I have two comments. One is maybe minor, and one is the bigger one. The minor comment, or perhaps question, is that well, first of all, I think that location information is important, so I think we should cover it somehow. But then, how do we cover it? And have you validated your current design against some, let's say, real use case and other specifications for location? Because what I understood, the whole location topic, geolocation, this is actually surprisingly complex. There's a lot of things you could express, but then of course there's a lot of prior work. Is there what are the right sources for us to, learn from and reuse from that make sure it's a robust design? Maybe you can have a quick answer on that, and then I take the other question.
Ari, is it okay? I think your question is that the GPS location, how to describe GPS location, right?
No, I'm more thinking about the validation. I see you have a one representation in the current specification, and have you validated that that's complete? Like, for example, is that based on an existing standard somewhere, and you just like making it an SDF format of it, or like what should we do to make sure it's let's say complete and according to the best practices in the industry of describing location?
As I shown in the conclusion and the future plans, the detailed format or data format, the data format for location will cover the GPS or other things, relative location, things like that. I will show some more examples for the GPS location. Is it okay?
Okay, maybe I'll need to check on my own the spec a bit more detail. And if I remember, the W3C at least had some work on geolocation that we could maybe cross-reference with. So that's one part on kind of how do we express the location. Then the bigger thing is that what we already discussed earlier, that we should make this location part of a kind of a larger functionality of expressing what we've been calling so far non-affordance information. And we definitely need a better name for that. I think Karsten may have had a better name for it. I'm too bad he wasn't here today. But this class of information that is not an affordance, so it's not something that the device itself would necessarily have a value for, but it's information that comes from somewhere outside. And location information that is not based on the, for example, GPS chip on the device would be a very good example of that. And I think like having this bigger concept under which the location is part of would make a lot of sense, instead of the location being like kind of a top level entity on its own. But that's something maybe again easier to do whiteboarding in a face-to-face.
Okay, thank you for your comments, and I'll describe some more detailed detailed description for the GPS location, things like that for the next version. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Michael?
I remember a conversation we had that was very confusing about relative location versus absolute location, and a lot of it was part A relative to part B, or device A relative to device B. And I'm wondering if that's still I'm trying to understand that controversy. You said indoor location, but I'm trying to understand like why. Is that? Can you expand on how that has developed, or maybe I just don't understand what's going on?
In the examples in the standard, the thing both has only the geolocation or postal address, but heaters in the boat have to inherit the location of the boat and the relative location for the indoor location, what room in the boat, in the heaters, things like that. So I think the indoor location is very important to the device, where is the device, the exact location.
So I'm just trying to understand, is there a proposal for what a relative address is going to look like at this point?
In the example of previous version of the presentation,
Okay.
Yes.
You had an example. Okay,
Yes.
well, I go back and look at that, I guess, and understand it.
Yes. we these are included in the standard version 2 or version 3, version 2 and version 3.
Okay. Thank you. Ari, you're back.
Yeah, on the relative, I mean, I posted a link to the section that describes it. It's a bit low on details, but what I understood, basically you give an offset to a location with the relative components. Maybe that would be good to explain kind of the approach in text, a bit more detail in the draft. Like how do you see this working? I can kind of deduct it from the example, but it would be good to explain in the text.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Are we ready for working group adoption?
Yes, I'm very appreciate if you adopt my document in the working group document.
Ari?
Yeah, I think we're still a bit early on this one because I think we would need to describe the higher level mechanism first, and to then kind of see. I have a hunch that this is kind of reasonable direction within that context of the higher level function, but I think we first need to look at the higher level and some other examples of what kind of information would there be before like going for adoption. So I'm again thinking this would be a design team discussion or maybe an interim discussion, like how do we design that higher level construct that they can actually host the information. So maybe that could be a topic of one of the upcoming interims and face-to-face.
That's a good point, Ari. If you have some ideas for that, then I'd appreciate to adopt your comments or some contents for the SF4G chatting. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Would it be possible to? So I mean, I think everybody's agreeing here that location is an important. I mean, this is sort of absolutely has a place for SDF. But as I read it, we have some concerns about the design here and how these things are structured. Would it be possible to get, I shouldn't say counter proposal, but kind of a proposal that shows an alternative way of doing this that would be more, as we talked about, non-affordance based and how to do that. It's because it would be easier to have it on the table and compare the two and sort of, progress from there. Because I think we have a bit of sort of mutual understanding to work out here on this. Ari?
Yeah, I think like the rather simple design I have in mind is that like now you see it kind of on the affordance level, this SDF location. It would be something, SDF non-affordance foo, and under that you would have location.
Yeah.
And then just
okay, I get that, but can you document that and then we can
sure I
compare the two.
I can put it in a hedge doc.
Yeah. Okay. Would it be possible then if we could get that, and if you can share it on so we can discuss the two together and see how we want to update this draft potentially then based on the what we come up with when it comes to design. And then we can move on that in a month's time at the next meeting. We can discuss it next meeting and then sort of decide on the way forward. Would that be okay? So we don't do adoption call now. We probably wait until the next meeting to do the adoption call.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. With that, any other sort of final comments, questions on the location draft? Yeah, that's maybe also a thing we could potentially discuss. I would prefer to have this draft called something on location, based on location, so that it more describes the. It's absolutely something used for digital twins, but digital twins is more than this. It's slightly misleading, perhaps, but we can take that separately on the list. Good. Thanks you again for presenting, and now I hope we have a way forward here. Good. Should we then move on to the next topic, which is NIPSI? And I will share the slides in a second. There you go. Okay, Bart, please go ahead.
Thank you, Nicholas. You can go to the next slide. So the agenda for today, we'll talk about the changes in NIPSI since adoption. So, we had adoption, so we now have draft ASDF NIPSI. We did, two main changes, which we focused first on kind of the API model and the code, and we're still working on the text. The text should be, before our next interim meeting in a month, the text will be available, but we've mainly focused on a working model versus, the documentation. So we have updates to the API structure and nomenclature to align with SDF. And then we also, in the last interim meeting, there was some discussion on what the data format would be. We have protobuf, and then obviously there's JSON and then CBOR as well. We prototyped all of that, and Rohit actually, who's on the call, did that work, and he's going to talk about the results and the recommendations there. And then we had a lively discussion last time on NIPSI in SDF. And I think Wouter also, he had some suggestions, but I felt like, we kind of didn't have a good picture in terms of what the possible deployment models were. So I kind of made that picture and discussed a few, or showed a few options on deployment models. Then to kind of level set us in the discussion. And that's kind of where I would really like to have that, kind of face-to-face meeting to kind of, talk through how, this would integrate, where it would be used, and so forth. All right, next slide. So on NIPSI, we released draft ASDF NIPSI 1. So we're now officially adopted. Thank you very much to the group here in kind of making that happen and supporting that. So we started working on the API definition, and or we actually finished that work to rework the APIs to align with the work that's going on in ASDF, and then very particularly the SDF draft, right? All the nomenclature that is in there. So that open API definition is available on GitHub in IoT onboarding, non-IP IoT control. The link is there. So what did we do? So we had different types of operations we could do, like connections, data, and so forth. We aligned all of those under a single kind of action category, so that now you have an SDF action, and there's multiple NIPSI APIs under those actions, so that they can kind of slide into an SDF model. We used attributes all over the place, so those are properties in SDF. So we changed all of that. We had also very specific objects that are basically properties of a thing, like a file for a file, for example, that you can upload or download, firmware, all those type of things. So all those became properties. So because they are really properties of SDF things. So that's so all of those specific APIs kind of disappeared. So we actually we reduced the total amount of APIs, and those all became those all sit under the kind of get post property a property of a thing now. So all of that was redone, and then we had our data interface used pub subtopics. SDF uses kind of an event nomenclature, so we also changed all of that to events as per the SDF spec, so that then slots in under an SDF event. So if you have some time to look at the YAML file, and if you kind of are adept at reading Open API definition, there's actually a few good editors that help you with that. Please review. We are making we're creating a schema section in the draft, and we are kind of making all those updates in the draft as well. That's in the works, so we'll have that available before I think our next interim meeting is a month from now. So we'll have that available before then. All of the work on the draft is also ongoing in that same GitHub repo. So if you want to look at kind of interim changes before we publish, all of that is also all that work is happening publicly. I think any questions on this before we go to the next topic? I have to also apologize. I didn't include a recap of what NIPSI is. I think Hoyang did a good job of that, but I hope you don't mind them jumping in with both feet here. So if there's any questions, then the next one is the data API, and I'll ask Rohit to talk about that because he did most of the code on that.
Yeah, thanks, Bart. So mainly we use MQTT as the interface for streaming the telemetry data from the devices. So one of the questions that came up in the mailing list last time was the use of protobuf as a message format for the MQTT data. We chose protobuf because it is compact, and the telemetry data that we are streaming is usually just raw binary data, and protobuf was suitable for that. Mostly the data that we are streaming, like for example, if it is a BLE device, it is going to be advertisements or notifications. One of the downsides that protobuf has is that it requires this external schema that needs to be published. So we do that as part of the draft as well. We also have that implemented right now in the open source tie-dye code that we have. So the link is there in the slide. Two other options that were proposed in the mailing list were JSON and CBAR. Neither of these formats require that external schema like protobuf. They include the schema is included in the message itself, so that makes it convenient for anyone who needs to adopt this. JSON also has this advantage of we are using JSON for all the other NIPSI APIs, so it's the same everywhere. But then one big disadvantage is that it's not compact. So we would have to encode all that binary data in base 64 or something, and then you're gonna have much bigger messages over the wire. CBAR, on the other hand, is compact, maybe not as much as protobuf, and it doesn't require a schema, and it also seems to be more suited for binary data than JSON. So I also have an implementation of our open source tie-dye gateway that uses CBAR. So I have another branch called CBAR, and the link is in the slide as well. So now what we're looking for is really recommendations from the working group on what payload format do we go with. I would also like to hear from like Carsten and Wouter regarding this, because they were the ones who I think brought it up on the mailing list last time, but I guess they couldn't make it today. Yeah, so I'm just looking for any feedback or questions or a recommendation from the working group.
Yeah, so I think we're comfortable with CBOR. You know, we tried it out; it works. I think that seemed to be the direction that we were pointed in. So we can leave this open, but I suggest that in our next rev of the spec we include CBOR as a format for the data interface.
Okay, Ari, you're in the queue.
Yeah, I think the CBOR makes a lot of sense if you don't see any showstoppers there. If it's only slightly bigger than protobuf. I mean, a couple of reasons. I mean, one is that you mentioned about the schema itself, and also, I mean, that is often not an issue the first time. Its problem comes when you change it, and then everything breaks. So with CBOR, you get slightly better behavior on that. And then the other one, of course, is that like a lot of the IETF stacks and implementations and such, they use CBOR, so it's let's say culturally maybe a bit more compatible for a lot of things. So I think that makes a lot of sense to use it if it is, as you said, still okay for your use cases.
Yeah, CBOR works fine for all the use cases that we have today. Yeah, just like protobuf.
Have you made any? Because I think I need to look into notes, but I think we also discussed doing like an evaluation and playing around with it, so to speak, on sort of whether it's implementation wise, is there are other hassles that you would introduce by changing the CBOR, or not, hassles you would get rid of. Any kind of other such insights doing this thing?
There are, and I'll let Rohit comment as well. I mean, I think because we use kind of protobuf for our, I would say, internal interfaces, we thought it may, from a decoding encoding perspective, be more resource intensive. But it turns out, since we're decoding anyway, it turns out that it's not that much different. So I don't know, Rohit, if you want to comment more. But it
yeah,
seems
I mean, that's just
the
that's just the internal implementation that we have, because of which we actually do have to decode and encode. So yeah, there's no benefit there. Also, yeah, we do have the open source project where I did try out CBOR. I tried replacing protobuf with CBOR. It was fairly straightforward and everything still works. So.
Okay. I mean, maybe it would be good to send. I don't remember now. I need to look in the notes if we said we would add CBOR or if we would replace protobuf with CBOR. But I suppose adding is the easiest thing.
Adding is the easiest, but it's also the easiest for developers to not have too many options.
Exactly. Of course, there might be
So I think since we're still early on, it's not so convenient for us because we already have implementations. But I think it's better from an industry perspective to only have one option.
Yeah, I would also say so. Michael, anybody else want to comment on that one?
If CBOR doesn't have a significant downside, then the fact that it includes the schema makes it much easier for, I think, dealing with lifecycle issues. You don't have to get the new schema before you can understand what's going on. I don't know what the error is. I don't know what protobuf does. I've never experienced that when the schema changes and it's not synchronized between the different entities. So I don't know what happens there, but I know what happens with CBOR, and the answer is it just keeps working. So I think that's the major benefit to me. And if it's unless you're dealing with gigabytes of data per second, then I think it probably doesn't matter.
Okay. Michael
Probably
Koster?
goes without saying, but I just want to weigh in on all the points in favor of CBOR, that being a standard within our stack and being something that we have in our tools kit already. I think it makes a lot of sense. Plus all the other reasons.
Okay.
Okay, then we will go ahead and make that change.
Perfect. Thanks. Good. Progress.
Yes.
I move on?
All right. So that concludes the NIPSI part. Again, anybody's welcome to go to that GitHub link. All the code is there. The API definitions are there, and the draft is there. So you can always review any of these before they go live on the IETF site. Now this is more, this is a kind of what we want to tackle after we got NIPSI in good shape, is like, how does NIPSI fit into SDF? And we tried to have some conversations on this last time, and it was a little bit chaotic. So I kind of, and I think that, I think we have to make sure that we kind of level set what the potential roles are here. In an actual deployment, and so we see, apart from the thing that is connected to a non-IP network through a gateway, two other potential roles. Obviously, the application role, and there's potentially a middleware between the application and the network. And we can point to quite a few of these implementations. But it's kind of important to stress kind of what the context is of each of these elements. And if we go like atypically here from right to left, right? If you look at the network gateway only really has a connectivity context, and actually must only have a connectivity context. So when we think about, can we send an SDF object all the way to the network gateway so that an application can ask, hey, please give me the temperature of something, right? We specifically do not kind of want that information in a network gateway. One of the reasons is obviously we want to keep it simple, but the other reason is in many cases that data is compartmentalized. So think about, you're going to a hospital, you are a patient that is connected to some kind of monitor, and these monitors are connected wirelessly. For example, the network shouldn't understand that bit of data that is being sent is actually your heart rate, right? So the goal of the network gateway and the goal of kind of the NIPSI APIs is to provide connectivity, right? If there's and on the other hand, if you go completely left, the application absolutely has that context, right? And it should absolutely be able to interpret that SDF model and figure out what a device could do and translate that into NIPSI, into NIPSI APIs to ask the network to get some information from a thing or send some information to a thing. Now, what we also see is that there's sometimes some application middleware that sits in the middle, and that may have both contexts. So this is, for example, a platform, that basically does, provides location, right? So it basically provides location to applications that do asset tracking, for example. But its function is to interpret a bunch of data that it gets from the network to calculate that location and to put that on a context-aware API, right? Or it could be, it could support, connected building use cases, let's say room temperature, and just environmentals, and it supports a bunch of sensors. And then there's an application that that is just interested in temperature, and it doesn't care about the types of sensors that are deployed and how you talk to them. Okay, so that's also a function. Now that middleware can have the application, or should have the application context as well as the connectivity context. So those are kind of the potential roles. So if we go to the next slide. So then there's kind of one deployment model, which is the simple one, which is there's no middleware. And in this case, there's an application that can take an SDF model. So it has a library, an SDF library, and it has a SCIM and NIPSI library. And the SDF model will have mapping. So an SDF property will map to properties of a device that can be read or written with NIPSI actions, right? And or a property could be something that that is published by a NIPSI event. So in that case, the application will tell the NIPSI gateway, this is a simple model, here's a device, I want to onboard it, and then it will do NIPSI operations against a NIPSI gateway. Okay, so that's the simple model. There's only two actors, and then it's very clear. The SDF thing is understood by the application, and then the application, tells the gateway, I know this device. I know what command I need to send to this device to get temperature because it was in my model. Okay, so that's deployment model number one. Now deployment model number two is there's an application middleware. Now the application middleware. So if we kind of forget about the application now, and we just forget about the left side, and you look at application middleware network gateway thing, it's exactly the same as the previous picture, right? Okay, it's a little bit simplified, but the application gateway, application middleware, knows how to onboard a SCIM device, and it knows how to do NIPSI operations. Now the question is, how does that application middleware actually get that SDF model, right? It could be the same as deployment model number one, is that, it basically gets, downloaded and the model, gets implemented by an administrator in the application middleware. But what could happen also is that an application tells the application middleware, hey, I have this, I want temperature in this building, and here's the devices that are in this building. And we actually send that SDF object to the middleware. And what we could potentially do is this could also be, so this could be embedded in the SCIM model, for example. So then if you, from an application, send a SCIM object of a specific device with an SDF model embedded, the middleware could provide an application-aware API back to the application. So these are just some thoughts, but this is kind of how this may how this could end up working. But I think it's important that we kind of agree on the roles, and that we work around the roles, and kind of how this would work. This is still very early on, but I wanted to just create some structure so we could all kind of think around what the a little less freewheeling around how this would be. And any thoughts on this?
All right.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, this is good. I mean, it makes it much more easier when we have diagrams to talk about. I think, I mean, at least the first model absolutely makes sense. On the second model, I mean, I haven't read the scheme draft in detail. It would be interesting to see like this embedding SDF in scheme, if I understood correctly. If you have some drafty example of that, how that would look like, that would be interesting to take a look. I guess it's a bit slightly more complex model, but I don't see any obvious reason why something like this wouldn't work. And one thing I was thinking here while you were presenting is that maybe we could kind of look NIPSI as kind of one of the bindings. I don't know about bindings or mappings. I don't know if you have a look at those SDF features yet into, but we do like these bindings to different ecosystems on two different levels. One is this additional metadata on the model, and then also the actual protocol bindings and mappings. And kind of along those capabilities, building for NIPSI might be kind of reasonable way to go. But again, maybe it's easier to do this on a whiteboard, maybe at the hackathon. So those are my quick comments. But then maybe a question. You mentioned that it's important in your model that the network gateway does not know what kind of data is transported.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have more details on like what's the level? I mean, I understand that you don't want to expose, for example, the values, but I guess it's also about identifiers. As you said, like the gateway shouldn't know it's a heart rate monitor, if I understand correctly. And but then again, like with Bluetooth and such, there's a profiles. So probably that's like profile information should not be exposed to the gateway because that would give away probably sensitive information. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's also up to the application to provide some end-to-end encryption if required, so that the payload when it's being transported is actually encrypted, right? But in principle, what we want is that because often some of the information that is being transported is subject to privacy and other laws and standards, right? Which from a network perspective you don't want to have to adhere to.
Yep.
So if you I would say present yourself as a wireless wire, right? Or then you don't have to adhere to all the healthcare standards, for example, right? Or if this is being used in kind of a federal use case, you don't have to adhere to those standards as far as data protection, because the data protection should be done end to end. But as soon as you understand what the payload of that thing is, then you're in trouble. Right.
Yeah. I think like that the payload is probably easy because I said that will be end-to-end encrypted. But I was wondering, what's the level of identifiers that are okay and are not okay? If you have that documented somewhere, that would maybe help to kind of think about how to design the mapping. Because as you said, like on the application side, you kind of know full information, but then on the gateway, you only should know some kind of a pseudonym, I assume, for this endpoint identifier.
Yeah, I think it would be different in different use cases, but I think most yeah, I think most like in I would say though the most common denominator would be is that you do not know the contents of the packet, and you do not know the what the contents is, right? So
okay. And should there be, I don't know, aspects of like, I don't know, rotating identifiers, etc. That is done nowadays with like, you know, MAC addresses and IP addresses, and are these also applicable concerns? Because then I'm thinking that might have impact on how we do the mapping, mapping and protocol binding here. That then the application stack would need to know, okay, this is the sequence of identifiers you should use on the wire in order to bind into the signal property, for example.
Yeah. So we already do this in when we onboard the device in SCIM. Actually, network like MAC addresses, as you point out already. I mean that's like a done deal. You know, MAC addresses will rotate. So what we do is we assign a UUID that's kind of specific to that SCIM object, right? So that when we address that device, we address it by that UUID.
Okay, and is that this static UUID is then not known by the gateway if the gateway shouldn't know the mapping between the ephemeral and the...
No, it's generated by the gateway. So it's an ID that's generated by the gateway so that it and the application can talk about that thing, not knowing more about what it is.
Okay. So is this explained somewhere in the SCIM draft, perhaps?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I'll take a look at that.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. We have 3 more minutes, so we need to push on here. So.
Yeah. I have one more slide, and this is something. So I did look at how to map NIPSI into ASDF. I read Karsten's draft. I actually connected with Karsten on it. We tried to set up a meeting, but with vacations, it didn't really happen yet. But I looked at, obviously we could use this, but I would really like a native mapping rather than through this kind of generic mapping construct, because you can map anything with this mapping construct, any schema. And I feel like we've done all the work to kind of fit NIPSI into SDF. So I'd like to kind of fit it in natively if possible. But I'll follow up with Karsten on this before our next meeting as well.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Sounds very good. And I mean, and also thanks a lot for doing the model stuff. I think it takes some time to wrap my head around it, but I mean, I think it's really good, sort of going in the right direction to have these things in place.
Thank you. We'll try to get the text out as soon as possible.
Good. And as I understand it, Karsten will be back from vacation in a week's time or a week and a half time. So you probably have some chance before the next interim. But this is really good. But thank you with that. Do we have any other things to finish before we finish? Things to bring up?
So what was the summary of things that Digital Twin needed to do before we start an adoption call?
The two things I suggested were like the validation of the information elements we want there. I mean, looking at other standards and other uses of location information in this context to make sure it's a good set. And then the other one is this putting that whole location in a context of non-affordance information elements and designing a generic mechanism where location would be one instance of. That was my suggestion.
And I think to facilitate that, doing some rough sketch on these things.
Yep.
On the second part, on the non-affordance part, would be a good bit. Yes. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Thanks a lot for joining today. Good meeting. We got somewhere.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
The next
you very much.
meeting is on October 2. I'm trying to get my
Same time.
calendar to there at the same time, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
So if this wasn't a good time for you and you didn't show up, then speak up both at a different time.
Really good.
Yeah. Or email, whatever. Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Talk to you again in a month's time. Take care. Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.